In this video, I'm going to talk about how to integrate the anima to make women chase you. The anima is a term first used by the psychologist Carl Jung.
The anima is a personification of all feminine psychological tendencies in a man's psyche, such as vague feelings and moods, prophetic hunches, receptiveness to the irrational, capacity for personal love, feeling for nature, and, last but not least, his relation to the unconscious. It is no mere chance that in olden times priestesses, like the Greek Sibyl, were used to fathom the divine will and to make connection with the gods.
The anima is sometimes thought of as the woman within, and the anima is a real thing. You actually can't avoid her. She appears to us in dreams, and she appears to us as projection, meaning when you fall in love or lust with a particular girl who you might not even know that well, Jung said that is because you are projecting your anima onto her. In other words, you have a certain idealized image of the feminine, which is in your unconscious, and when you meet a girl who you strongly desire, it's usually because she somehow matches up with that idealized image you have, and then you project those qualities onto her. A bit like how a movie gets projected onto a blank screen at a movie theater. That's where we get the word projection from. It's actually a very good metaphor for this. And this is something that you really can't actually avoid. It's going to happen to you. It's happened to you before. It's almost certainly what caused you to lose women in the past, to things up with a girl you really liked, to get needy, become impatient with her, react emotionally, get one-itis where you just can't get over a certain girl and you become obsessed with her. All of this is anima projection, or anima possession even. And in my opinion, you really can't understand 80% of what goes on in dating or relationships without understanding this phenomenon of the anima and anima projection. The way we react emotionally to a woman who matches our inner ideal is not explained by Darwinism alone. It is not explained by evolution or by nature or by biology. These sciences, as excellent as they are for describing a lot of human nature, they just don't adequately explain why guys will become utterly obsessed with one particular girl and not with another, even to the point of literally killing themselves if that girl leaves them or betrays them. That's not explained by natural selection. It doesn't make sense biologically. To understand obsession, infatuation, love, addiction to a certain person, you really need to have a good grasp of Jungian psychology specifically. That means understanding the psyche, it means understanding the depths of the unconscious, and it means understanding this, the anima, the inner woman, the unconscious ideal of femininity that is alive deep down within your psyche as a man. There's also the opposite, what Jung called the animus. This is the idealized image of a man that exists in every woman's psyche. Now, I say all this up front because when you tell guys, there's a woman inside you who's actually alive down there in your unconscious, that comes across as a very weird concept. It doesn't sound right intuitively. Like when I first came across Jung psychology, this idea didn't really appeal to me. It just didn't strike me as true according to my experience. But actually, it's a fact. If you've ever fallen in love with a girl who you didn't even really know that well, if you've ever become obsessed with a girl who you hadn't slept with or even kissed yet, if you've ever been texting a girl and your nerves are on edge waiting for her to reply and you're so anxious to be with her that you literally can't think of anything else, well, that's the anima. That's anima projection. And I mean, who hasn't been there, right? What I've just described are universal male experiences. Every single guy has had experiences like this. Every single guy has met a girl, or maybe a pretty girl gave him a little bit of attention or showed some interest in him and he wasn't expecting it, and he immediately becomes obsessed with her, starts thinking about her all the time, starts idealizing her, imagining a future relationship, starts thinking that she's the one, she's not like the others, she's different, I actually like this one, famous last words. All of that again is anima projection. In this case, you are projecting your anima, your inner idealized woman, onto this person. And these are what Jung would call psychic facts. This is a very important concept. When you propose an idea like the anima, when you say that every man has an inner female within his psyche, the response that you might have to that is like, well, says who? Prove it. Because it's not like you can put the anima under a microscope. It's not like there's any way of seeing her or proving her existence scientifically. But the fact that men become obsessed with a girl who they barely know is a fact. This is something that, again, we've all experienced. It doesn't matter if you're 12 years old falling in love with a girl in your class, or even a guy in his late 50s, who should know better, should be mature by now, but no, he ends up falling head over heels for some 20-year-old secretary or waitress or something, ends up, divorcing his wife, losing everything, losing his kids, and it's all because he became utterly transfixed on some random girl just because, for whatever reason, she matched up with his inner ideal, his inner anima image. And this is why Jung describes the anima as a witch. It's a magical power that she exerts within us. She exerts the magical power of fascination, possession. You could compare it to demonic possession, like possession by a succubus. But even more seriously, Jung actually compared it to possession by a god. He said that the archetypes, of which the anima is the oldest and the most powerful within a man's psyche, Jung said that the archetypes essentially behave within the psyche as if they are gods. And so in this way, if the anima is not developed or integrated into consciousness, she really does lead men to their doom. The anima can cause men to kill themselves. If you think about what is probably one of the single biggest causes of suicide in men, it's losing a girl, right? And why are guys often so completely devastated by a breakup, even for the rest of their life in some cases? Well, it's because he projected his anima onto that girl, and so in his mind she is literally like a god, and having lost her and believing he'll never find anyone like her again, a lot of guys at that point literally do end their lives. So the anima is actually not only real, but she is deadly dangerous. When you're talking about this, you are talking about the number one factor that causes guys to completely fuck up their lives. The anima is unmatched in terms of deadly, lethal, dangerous force. The force of illusion, the force of evil magic. And when I say evil magic, I mean magic or illusion that leads to death rather than leading to life and to enhancing life. Now, on the other hand, when you make the anima more conscious, this gives you tremendous powers and abilities which you would not otherwise be able to access. I call this video How to Make Women Chase You by Integrating the Anima, and women will chase you when you have integrated this thing. It's very, very powerful. It's literally magical. It gives you enormous personal magnetism and charisma when you are in touch with certain of these hidden powers that only integrating your unconscious femininity can give you. For one thing, you really can't even know women as women until you've integrated the anima. And that's because until this inner image or archetype of the female has been made conscious, you are always going to be projecting her onto the women you meet. And so long as you're projecting your inner ideal onto women in the world, you're not actually seeing them. And if you're not seeing them, then you're really at a big disadvantage because you're dealing with an illusion. You're interacting with a mirage, a hologram. But in many cases, they can see you. They can see you all too well. And so you're basically at a huge disadvantage with women because you're looking at them and seeing this goddess, whereas they're looking at you and just seeing a normal, dorky, awkward guy like every human being is. And so you're basically f***ed. And this is the situation for the vast majority of men when they're talking to a girl they really desire, a girl they idealize. You're idealizing her, but she's not idealizing you. And when that's the case, she has all the power. She's got you completely by the balls. Now, on the other hand, when you integrate your anima, meaning when you make these unconscious feminine traits and tendencies within yourself conscious, then you no longer project them onto women in the physical plane. And that strips women of pretty much all of their power over you. Funny enough, when you no longer idealize women, you simply do not get needy anymore. You do not get clingy because you do not need them. And they can sense this. They can sense it from you immediately. It's like, oh, this guy doesn't give a fuck. And so it's very interesting and very paradoxical. Integrating your femininity actually has the effect of making you much more masculine. You know, what are the traits we associate with masculinity? Certain independence, self-sufficiency, self-reliance, autonomy. A man who's in his masculine polarity doesn't get needy. He doesn't get clingy. He doesn't get overly emotional or sentimental. He doesn't fantasize and daydream about lost causes and girls who aren't interested in him. And all of those qualities are amplified when you integrate your inner female, paradoxically enough, simply because when you are no longer projecting your inner female onto women in the real world, then you no longer need those women for access to the divine feminine, as you might call it. You know, you still like women, you still enjoy spending time with them, you enjoy their company, you enjoy their energy, you like having sex with them, but you do not need any of this at all. It doesn't feel like this life or death thing anymore. And so I just want to draw your attention to that. It's very paradoxical. Getting in touch with your feminine side makes you more masculine. And the corollary to that is that if doing this work, integrating the anima, integrating your feminine, is not making you more masculine, more autonomous, more self-assured and self-possessed, then you're not doing it right. Now, the other half of this paradox is that if you have not consciously integrated your feminine side, which the vast majority of guys have not, then you will unconsciously behave as a woman. You will be unconsciously feminine. And this is actually very, very common. A lot of guys, even guys who are very masculine presenting or masculine appearing, the moment they get involved with a woman, they become a woman themselves. You know, they're emotional, irrational, needy, possessive, jealous, clingy, all of the negative traits we tend to associate with femininity. When you have not integrated your anima, those negative female traits will run your life as a man. You know, things like being moody, being hypersensitive to criticism, having an unconscious need and craving for conflict and for drama, looking for male authority figures to tell you what to do in your life, daddy, not being able to make a decision without some man telling you it's the right decision. All of these are archetypally female traits, and yet you would be amazed by how incredibly girly most so-called masculine men actually are once you scratch the surface. Another one, very common in men these days, is a craving to be admired by other people, and specifically to be admired for your looks. That's obviously an archetypally female trait. And yet many young men today cannot pull themselves away from the mirror. They're obsessed with being good looking, with quote unquote looks maxing. They want to be admired for their looks like a little flower. And that's because they are unconsciously in their feminine polarity without realizing it. So that's the first big reason why integrating your anima makes women chase you, makes you more attractive to women. And it's that when you integrate the anima, it removes this tendency of projection, removes your tendency to idealize women. It stops you from projecting your own unconscious femininity outward into the world onto women. And when you remove those illusions, those magic spells that the anima puts you under, then you no longer have any sort of neediness or clinginess towards women at all. And that is by far the most important element of what goes into making girls chase you, because they can't chase you if you're chasing them. And once you remove projection and idealization, then you're not going to be chasing girls anymore, ever. Now, you'll still pursue girls, of course, for sport, for fun, for the enjoyment of it. You know, you'll approach girls, you'll flirt, you'll lead them, you'll escalate. And all of that is archetypally masculine. You're taking action, you're inflicting yourself on the external world, but you're not going to be chasing them at an emotional level. In other words, you're not going to feel dependent on them to feel good. You're not going to be emotionally dependent on them for validation anymore. And this makes you highly magnetic to women. It gives you a glamour in the occult sense of that term. It gives you a certain mystique because they know you don't need them. They know they can't control you. You're not chasing their approval at all. And so they start chasing your approval to compensate. And actually what happens in a lot of cases is that this projection or idealization effect reverses, meaning the girls start to project their ideal masculine onto you. They begin hallucinating that you're this perfect guy who they've always fantasized about, and they project those fantasies onto you. And so it's interesting, you know, by freeing yourself from the anima and by integrating her, it's almost like you start to get some of her witchy powers, those powers of illusion. So that's the first reason that integrating your anima makes women chase you. But there's a higher level to this, a more esoteric level, a more mystical or numinous level. And this is that integrating the anima is an absolutely vital step towards becoming more than human, as they call it in magic and in occultism. In other words, this work of integrating your anima can give you certain supernatural powers, or at least put you in closer contact with those powers. I'm talking here about things like telepathy, clairvoyance, clairaudience, precognition, prophetic hunches, prophetic dreams, predicting the future, having a sixth sense ability to read people, to see around corners, so to speak. All of these powers are accessed by and through the unconscious mind. They are not part of your conscious mind or ego. And in a man, the unconscious is female, according to Jung. In a woman, her unconscious is male. In a man, his unconscious is female. And this is not an idea just invented by Jung. It's actually very ancient. Psyche, which is the ancient Greek word for soul, was a female goddess, actually. And throughout the Middle Ages, particularly in alchemy, a man's soul or psyche was very often represented as a female or a young maiden. And so in places in Jung, particularly in his Red Book, we get the sense that the anima is not merely just another archetype that exists in the psyche, but she actually is the psyche itself on some level. She is your soul itself. So we can represent it like this. And this is why for Jung, integrating the anima is so essential for the individual's full development, because this goes much deeper than just improving your relations with women. Developing a relationship with the anima is actually the essential first step to being able to access and communicate with the wider unconscious itself. And this is where all the power really lies. As Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will dictate your life and you will call it fate. So the deeper reason to integrate the anima is that this is part of the larger project of individuation, making the unconscious conscious. And we can represent that as follows. We have here a small dot inside a circle. This circle represents your whole psyche, both conscious and unconscious minds. The dot in the middle is what you're conscious of. This is your conscious mind, or what Jung calls your ego, conscious awareness. Now, the circle around the dot is your unconscious mind. This is everything that is in you that you are not conscious of. This can be things like repressed memories, complexes, instincts, archetypes, ancestral memories, and beyond this, even perhaps certain hidden powers and possibilities, such as the siddhis or supernatural powers discussed in Buddhism. Now, the dot and the circle together represent your full self, your total self. This is what Jung called the archetype of the self, or the imago Dei, the image of God. And so the whole point of Jung's entire body of work, his whole system, the point is to expand this dot of consciousness so that you become progressively more and more conscious of your total self. The more consciousness expands, the more you are conscious of in your total psyche, and the more powers you will have, the more hidden abilities and powers you will unlock. So this is really about unlocking your full human potential, maybe even your full superhuman potential. This is also what Jesus was talking about a lot of the time, although it was covered in parables and metaphors. And he had one very good metaphor for this in particular. It's in the Gospel of Thomas. He talks about a farmer who owns a field, and there's hidden treasure buried underneath the field, but the farmer doesn't know about it. And so he dies without ever finding the treasure. Now, in this metaphor, the surface of the field represents the conscious mind, that which we can see and are aware of, but the earth underneath the field represents the unconscious. And the buried treasure is the metaphor Jesus was using for the secret powers and possibilities, the superhuman powers that actually lie dormant within every human being's unconscious, but which unfortunately most people never realize are down there. They never go looking for it. And so they die in ignorance and poverty without ever having realized their full potential. And so that's the second big reason why integrating the anima makes women chase you, because once you have integrated her, once you're in some kind of working relationship with her, she basically comes to serve as a guide to the rest of the unconscious, the even deeper and stranger layers within you that go beyond the anima. And this is an absolutely indispensable element of individuation, making the unconscious conscious, accessing your full human potential, and becoming actually in the process something more like a superhuman, which we might say someone like Jesus actually was, based on the miracles he was recorded as doing, or the Buddha for that matter. So the anima can appear to us in three basic ways. The first is that we may unconsciously project her onto certain women we encounter in real life. The second is that she may appear to us in dreams. And the third way the anima can appear to us is if we summon her directly. This is done using a technique that Jung called active imagination. Now, active imagination is one way of putting it. What it really is, actually, is shamanism. It is contacting the spirit world, the spiritual plane, what some people call the astral plane. It's diving into the depths of your personal unconscious, and then beyond that, possibly even into the wider collective unconscious. Jung was essentially a sorcerer, a shaman, and Jungian psychology is really shamanism in its essence. If you read Jung's Red Book, that becomes very, very obvious. And if you do this work, you will also become a shaman yourself. That's really what this is all fundamentally about. That's what engaging with Jung's techniques, his system of psychology, is going to do. It's going to make you a shaman. It's going to give you the ability to access and communicate with the underworld, or the overworld, if you prefer to phrase it that way. And when you can do this, it's sort of like going from being a two-dimensional being to being a three-dimensional being. You can see more. You can see things before they happen, even in some cases. And among other things, this makes you significantly more attractive to women. It gives you a depth and a force of personality that is very hypnotic to them. So this is where it's at. This is really, really powerful stuff. And so in a second, I'm going to get into the two most mind-bending psychedelic ways I've discovered to integrate your anima and make women chase you. Before we get to that, I just want to remind you to sign up for my email newsletter. It's completely free, and you'll get new articles from me every day on dating, game, masculinity, how to attract women, as well as these more esoteric or occult topics. When you sign up for the email newsletter, you're also going to get a short book I wrote, complimentary, completely free. It's called 5 Easy Ways to Make Beautiful Women Approach You, no matter your looks, age, or money. So to get that right now, just click the link in the description below, put in your email address, and I'll send you this free book immediately. This book is going to show you the simple tricks that make beautiful women approach you first for a date or sex, and it basically puts your dating life on steroids. So pause this video right now, click the link below, put in your email address to get this free book now. And when you do that, you're also going to be signed up to my newsletter where I post all my best stuff, including the more controversial content that I can't post here on YouTube. All right, so what we're going to get into now is the 2 core techniques of how to integrate your anima to make women chase you. And the first technique is very simply to start recording your dreams. In other words, keep a dream journal. And when you have a dream, write it down and then make an effort to interpret it. And this is really, really important. This is sort of like the activity, the practice of Jungian psychology. You know, like if you want to be a bodybuilder, what is the daily practice? You go to the gym every day, you lift weights. If you want to be a Buddhist, what's the daily practice? Obviously, you meditate every day. Well, if you want to do Jungian individuation, you start recording your dreams every day. That's what this work consists in. It is the bread and butter of what this work actually is. It's dream interpretation. So in the morning, if you had a dream, as soon as you wake up, the memory's fresh, make a quick note of what you dreamed about. And then later on in the day, when you have some free time, make an attempt to actually interpret that dream, to try to figure out what is the unconscious trying to tell me? What is the unconscious trying to communicate to me? So a few simple guidelines here for dream analysis from a Jungian point of view. If you dream of a male who you have any sort of conflict with, that is usually a personification of your shadow. This is Jung's term for the aspects of our being which we have repressed and which we don't like to admit to. This could be things like cowardice, laziness, greed. In some people who are sexually repressed, lust is a big part of their shadow. And generally speaking, if you have a dream with another person or entity who's also male, and if you have any sort of conflict or enmity with them, that's usually a personification of your shadow, according to Jung. Now, by contrast, Jung says that when you have a dream about a woman or girl, any female figure whatsoever, that is almost always your anima. In other words, she is a personification of your unconscious female tendencies or traits. So that part of your psyche might appear in your dream as a female from your family, like your mother or sister. She may take the guise of a girl you know, a love interest, a female friend, a crush, or she may appear as a mysterious female who you don't know at all in real life, but there's almost a kind of mystical quality to her. Jung called this feeling numinosity. It's one of the calling cards of the anima and of the deeper reaches of the unconscious more generally. When you're in touch with this thing, there is a great feeling of the numinous. In other words, a feeling of mystery, strangeness, surrealness, even possibly a slight tinge of fear or awe. But it can also be a kind of sacredness that is difficult to put into words, like you're dealing with something that is not of this world. And so if you go by that simple heuristic, anytime a woman or girl appears in my dream, that's my anima appearing to me, you can then start to attempt to interpret the dream on that basis. Like, okay, I had this dream about a female figure. This represents some kind of feminine tendency or trait or quality in my own psyche that is mostly unconscious, or maybe a group of those tendencies. What might it be referring to? If you record your dreams for long enough, you might find they occasionally start to predict the future. That's what happened to me. It's what caused me to take dreams much more seriously than I had done before a few years ago. So one of the side effects of recording your dreams is that you may begin to see that they are actually trying to tell you things. They may be trying to give you guidance about your life, warnings about things that might be coming down the road, prophecies, precognition, and all of that is actually archetypally feminine. Divination, prophecy, oracles, predicting the future. Those are all classically feminine powers. The Greek oracle at Delphi was always a female. And dream interpretation, if you do it long enough, will begin to put you in greater touch with those powers. Female intuition, emotional intelligence, sensitivity, prophetic hunches, etc. Very, very powerful in life. Very powerful in business, career, making money, etc. So all this stuff is actually very practical. It makes you a shark. It can make you very, very dangerous. A formidable man to go up against. And I say that here because, when you hear about something like keeping a dream journal, it seems very hippie-ish. It seems like kind of a waste of time, like woo-woo spiritual bullshit. But this is actually something that can make you extremely resourceful as a man. Being in touch with the spirits of the underworld, with the depths of your own unconscious. It was really only after I started doing this practice that I began really succeeding in life and in my business. Your rational mind has to be working in concert with your irrational mind. That's what the union of opposites, of male and female, psychologically means. That's what it represents. And so keeping a dream journal, interpreting your dreams, is the first step towards doing that. And the more you record your dreams, the more you are going to start having dreams of the anima. The clearer, the crisper she's going to become, the more vivid she'll be. And she will start telling you things. She will start giving you messages. Now, they usually won't make sense at first. You're going to have to decode them. And that's because the unconscious does not speak English, or at least it doesn't speak it very well. The unconscious speaks image. It speaks in images, in symbols. And it's up to you, when you record your dreams, to try to interpret these symbols, these metaphors that you get, and what they might mean. So how do you do this? Well, there is no one-size-fits-all answer. There isn't any particular book or resource on how to interpret your dreams that I can really endorse here. I've never really seen a good one. If you want a real answer to this, what I did at least is actually read Jung's works, which is not easy. They're pretty dense. But if you read his books, he brings up examples of dreams that his patients had all the time and how he interpreted those dreams. And that will give you a sense of how to do this. Now, however, I know most people are probably not going to do that. You're not going to go out and read Jung's books. It's pretty daunting, actually. So in lieu of the proper approach, you could also just ask ChatGPT. As much as I hate recommending this, it's kind of the easiest thing to do right now. And a prompt you could use is something like, interpret the meaning of this dream for me as if you are Carl Jung or a Jungian psychologist. So if you have absolutely no idea where to start with interpreting your dreams, that might be helpful. I would warn against becoming reliant on ChatGPT for this, however. Just use it like training wheels in the beginning, because ultimately it's the fact that you actually engage and try to interpret the dreams yourself that actually opens up that connection with the unconscious. If you just outsource this to ChatGPT, that's not really going to happen. It's going to be like going to the gym but having a robot lift the weight for you. It's not going to change you at all. It's not going to make you any stronger just because the weight is being moved. Well, it's the exact same way with dream interpretation. In dream interpretation, it's actually the effort you put into trying to interpret the dream that actually changes you more than the end result. But I know already in the comments I'm going to get questions like, well, how do I analyze my dreams? How do I interpret them? What does it mean? Well, you do it by doing it. That's the only real answer I can give you, okay? You learn this by actually just doing it and by doing it over and over again until you get better at it. And you go one dream at a time. Just use common sense, use Google. If you dream of a snake, just Google, what do snakes symbolize in dreams? Or you might look up snakes in mythology, snakes in religion and folklore. Wikipedia is really good for that, And from going down that rabbit hole, you might find things like snakes are a symbol of sexuality, obviously because it resembles a penis more than any other animal. Or there's the snake in the Garden of Eden. Or there's the snakes of the caduceus, the symbol of the god Hermes, who's the messenger between the realm of gods and men. And so hypothetically, if you had a dream with a snake, for example, you can go down this rabbit hole and kind of start feeling it out. Which of these different associations with the snake resonate with me? What might this symbol be referring to for me personally, especially at this time in my life? Like, what might it be referring to of things that I'm going through right now or things that I'm particularly concerned with? What do I personally associate a snake with? Maybe you have some memory of like a snake in a cartoon you used to watch as a kid. That could be like a hint as to what this is trying to say. And anyway, by doing this, you start to open up entire worlds or vistas of what can actually be extremely dense messaging and ideas coming from the unconscious. And again, all of this is done usually through the medium of the Anima. She is sort of the one who is pulling the strings in the unconscious until you've integrated her. As Jung said, integrating the shadow is the apprentice piece in the individual's development, but integrating the Anima is the masterpiece. So all dream interpretation is generally going to tend to lead you over time towards the Anima. And so it generally tends to go shadow, Anima, self. Not always, but that's the typical progression that Jung observed. It's also what I've observed in my own life doing this. In the first phase, you'll have a lot of dreams in which the shadow is often the most prominent figure. Any kind of nightmare or scary dream is usually a personification of the shadow. I remember years ago when I was about 14 or so, I had this really haunting nightmare where I kept seeing a doppelganger of myself, like a twin of me, but he was evil and he was trying to kill me. And that's like a textbook shadow dream. It's almost like so on the nose, it couldn't possibly be a more perfect example of what a dream of the shadow is meant to be like, And the shadow is once again a personification of inferior parts of yourself that you've disowned or don't want to acknowledge. And the shadow will keep coming up in dreams until you have acknowledged those darker or inferior parts of your own nature and made them conscious and begun to integrate them. Usually comes with a great deal of power and energy and creative force when you do that successfully. Now that process might take years and most people never even get there, but assuming you do at least partially begin to integrate your shadow, you'll generally have less and less dreams about the shadow. And increasingly, you may begin to dream more and more about Anima figures. Like I said, they might take a familiar form like a sister or your mother or girls you know in real life, or they might take strange and mysterious and very unfamiliar forms, like a mysterious or divine female figure who seems almost to be like a kind of hyper-real entity or a god or goddess. So anyway, that's the first way you can begin to integrate the Anima. It's to simply start recording your dreams, especially Anima dreams, and make a serious effort to try to interpret them as best you can. Again, there's no right or wrong answers here necessarily. Just try your best. That's all the unconscious expects from you. And if you try your best, even if you don't always get there, or you can't always find a good interpretation of what the dream actually means that kind of satisfies you, I find the unconscious will usually get back to you with another dream, another time, until you get the message of what it's trying to say. All right, now the other way to integrate the Anima anima is what Jung called active imagination, and this is pretty advanced. So active imagination means essentially that you lie in a dark room alone. Doing this before bed is generally the best. You then relax your body, one body part at a time. Start by relaxing the muscles of your face, relax your jaw, your eyes, your forehead, your scalp, your neck. Then relax the left foot, left leg, left hip, right foot, right leg, right hip, working up the body. Relax your lower back, torso, upper back, shoulders, traps, arms, etc. And this should take you a couple of minutes or so. And then when you're really nice and relaxed, what you want to do now is, and this is kind of difficult to put into words, but I'll try. Basically, you want to just see what images start to come up in your mind's eye. So you relax yourself completely, laying in a dark room, and then you just lay back and you watch what comes up in your mind. And it might be images, it might be words, it might be things that don't make any sense. They're just completely random, or they seem random, but just sort of take note of them like a stream of consciousness. So it might be like, I'm seeing an apple, I'm seeing a white light, I'm seeing a field with a woman standing there facing away from me. And then you might ask like, well, what is the woman doing? She's wearing green, kind of a flowing green robe. She seems to be picking up something from the ground. And it's like you're kind of half making these up and half just observing what images come up on their own. And there's a kind of knack to this, so some of you will probably be able to do this right away. For others, it might be more difficult. If you do find it difficult, if you're having distracting thoughts, I would really recommend meditating before doing this, maybe for 10 minutes or 20 minutes, or you could just take a little bit longer, relaxing your whole body, one body part at a time. That is essentially a way of inducing a mild hypnotic trance. I talked about this in my previous video on the gateway process. And when you're in trance, you generally won't get those distracting thoughts, at least not as much. And it will be much easier to just lay back and see what images start to flow into your mind. So that's active imagination, the basic process. Now there's two ways to do this. The first is a more passive approach, like what I just outlined, where you're not really trying to visualize anything specific. You literally just kind of follow the images and see where they lead. And if you do it this way, over time, you'll notice that the images, the imagination takes on a kind of momentum. It's less and less you forcing it or kind of making it up yourself. And more, you notice you're kind of just sitting back and things are actually just being shown to you. And you can then actually interact with things. If a person or some kind of figure emerges, or an animal, anything, you can talk to it, you can ask it questions, and it will often get into a dialogue with you. And all of these things that come up are obviously aspects of your own psyche, parts of your own unconscious manifest as symbols or imagined characters. However, they're also usually archetypal, meaning they can have a resonance with the collective unconscious, the collective ancestral memory of all your human and pre-human ancestors. Now, the other way to approach this active imagination is a more active process. And this is where, say, you want to deliberately invoke a particular aspect of the unconscious. So in this case, you might invoke the Anima herself. And the way you do this is, again, after relaxing your body, after putting yourself into this light trance, you can say, I want to speak to my Anima, or I want to speak with my soul. I want to speak with the female part of my psyche. The Anima really likes to talk as a rule. She likes attention. She wants to be given attention. She wants to be asked questions, communicated with. She's one of the easiest of these entities to summon because she seems to actually want to be summoned in a lot of cases. And then from there, it's really up to you where you want to take this. You can ask the Anima questions. You can get into a conversation with her, a dialogue with her. You can ask her what certain of your dreams meant. Or if you're having any kind of woman troubles at all, that's a really good time to ask the Anima her opinion on this. You might ask her what you should do, ask her advice, ask her guidance, and you'll very often get a very, very detailed and insightful answer. It's very weird when it happens. You're kind of thinking like, there's no way I could have come up with this on my own. So where is this actually coming from? And it's quite strange, because on one hand you might say, well, aren't we just making this up at the end of the day? Like, isn't this just imagination? Isn't this basically no different than talking to an imaginary friend? And in a way, yeah, that's exactly what you're doing, And yet when you get involved in this, and particularly if you do it often, you would be surprised by how complex and elaborate and insightful some of the answers you get from this thing actually are. I've had beings tell me things in these active imaginations that afterwards I'm thinking like, there is no way I made that up myself. Like, I've been thinking about this problem or this topic for years, and what it told me just there is something that has never occurred to me before. A lot of people will use this to decode things like the Bible or certain spiritual or esoteric texts that they're kind of struggling with or that they don't understand. And so basically any problem you're having in your life or any topic that you're really, really interested in or curious about, anything that's consuming you at the moment, you can do active imagination and summon beings like the Anima and ask them questions about it. And you will often get answers from these things that you just could not have arrived at otherwise. And the anima, the eternal feminine, this is really the aspect of the psyche that you want to speak to anytime you're having a challenge that involves a woman or women in general. You know, if you're unsatisfied with your life for some reason that involves women or the feminine in any way, that's really the area where it would pay to invoke the anima and ask her opinion on it, ask her guidance on it. And beyond that, like I said, the anima can also function as a spirit guide to the wider unconscious. You see this if you read Jung's Red Book, which is his record of his active imaginations during this process. And initially he's having visions of this young girl or maiden he refers to as his soul. But as it goes on, she then becomes more like a background character or a kind of a helper who is showing him the way into having visions of even deeper and stranger aspects of his own unconscious. And in this way, the anima can function as a sort of portal through which you can begin to know God. That corresponds to what Jung calls the archetype of the self, which is the imago Dei, or image of God. And that's an entirely different archetype from the anima, a much larger one, also much more complex, much more potentially dangerous. But in Jung's model, you basically only begin to approach the big self through the anima. So again, it goes shadow, anima, self. When you've integrated the shadow, you progress to working with the anima. And after many years of wrestling with the anima problem, as Jung calls it, only then can you finally begin to get real insights into the nature of the self and ultimately into the nature of God. So in a sense, women are actually leading you to God. You know, your love of women, your desire for women, your attraction to women, this obviously has a biological component. We evolved to want women so we can spread our genes, but it also has a spiritual component. You know, your attraction to women is actually a way for your psyche to try to encourage you to integrate the unconscious feminine parts of your own nature, such as intuition, emotional sensitivity, receptiveness to the irrational, love. And when you do that, you unify the opposites within yourself. In alchemy, this is symbolized in the figure of the rebus. This is a being with two heads, a male and a female head, representing both male and female qualities in one. It's the end product of the alchemical magnum opus, or great work. And what this is referring to is a union of opposites. It's a union of many different pairs of opposites, all in the same man. It's a union of male and female, conscious and unconscious, and also spirit and matter. So you're no longer male or female, but both. You have access to both sides, both sets of traits. You're no longer just operating from your conscious mind, but you also have access to your unconscious. And you are both spiritual and material. You have a foot in both worlds, as they say. You're fully competent to operate in the material world. You know, you're realistic, pragmatic, you're not an idealist. You're extremely in touch with practical realities of life. But at the same time, you also have this simultaneous connection to the spirit world. It's like you're wearing special glasses where you can see both worlds at once, one overlaid on the other. This is also what the symbol of the cross is about in Christianity. You know, the fact that Jesus was killed on a cross is actually an incredible synchronicity, in my opinion, because it just so happens that the cross is actually the best and truest possible symbol for the work of self-perfection, for the great work. It's about unifying the opposites of spiritual and material, conscious and unconscious. And in the symbol of the cross, the horizontal line represents the spiritual world, or the unconscious. It doesn't touch the ground, and therefore it's untethered to material reality. It's perfect but idealistic, whereas the vertical line of the cross represents the material world, or the conscious mind. It is anchored in the earth, in the dirt, in the physical realm of the human body, and of three-dimensional objects in space and time. And so the perfect man, the perfected man, the man who has completed the great work, is a union of these opposites. That's what Jung was really trying to teach people. It's also what Jesus was teaching. And when you do this, yes, women will chase you. You will be much more attractive to women because you are whole. And people are attracted to wholeness. They're attracted specifically to the wholeness in others that they lack within themselves. And so this whole topic of pickup on attracting women, there's a huge spiritual component to this. You'll find that when you do this kind of spiritual work, you are much more attractive to the opposite sex. And things just sort of tend to go your way more often. Everything just gets a lot easier. All right, so in this video, I showed you how to make women chase you by integrating the unconscious feminine within your own psyche. However, this really isn't going to work for you at all unless you're already in a high degree of what's called masculine polarity. Most men these days are not masculine enough. They're not in their masculine polarity. They have things like low testosterone, erectile dysfunction, addiction to porn, and all of this is both a cause and a symptom of a lack of masculine polarity, masculine vitality. Now, if you want to know how to supercharge your masculine polarity very fast, I strongly recommend you get my book, How to Make Beautiful Women Approach You, no matter your looks, age, or money. Once again, this book is completely free, costs you nothing. Just click the link in the description below, put in your email and I'll send you the book right now. And the point is, in this book, I'm going to show you 5 ways to increase your masculine polarity that make you magnetic to women, literally, so that they approach you. And this is actually really important before working with the Anima because, like I said, you really need to max out your masculine polarity first before beginning to do any work with the feminine. You know, Anima integration, what we've been talking about here, is actually a very advanced thing, but you really want to make sure you've got things like testosterone and the other male sex hormones working at maximum output first. And one nice side effect of doing that is testosterone increases your pheromones, and pheromones actually make women approach you. And I show you how to do that in this book. Once again, it's completely free. Just click the link below to get it right now, and I'll see you next time.